Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over the market. Let's talk about what happened today in the markets after a pretty, eventful for the most part-ish day, week, and honestly, really the last 2 or so weeks. So yeah, I'll give you my thoughts on Tesla moving forward, what I think will happen into next week. I believe it's the final week. Yeah, the final week of the month. Well, we have one day on the 31st on the next week, I guess, but nonetheless, let's jump into it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, my thoughts on the charts, etc., I do have a YouTube membership section. That link is down below, where for $3 a month, I share my post updates, essentially my opinion on what the chart is looking like to me. Every day the market is trading, so definitely check it out if you're interested. Just $3 a month or $5 gives you access to the first tier, which is Tesla and sometimes other stocks, plus NVDA as well. Again, just sharing my thoughts constantly as the market is trading, constantly updating what I see in the charts. But nonetheless, jumping into it, Tesla closing the day up with a very nice 5.27%, closing at $248.71, which obviously compared to the market is going to be a pretty substantial outperformance. Tesla showing relative strength, arguably because of Elon's kind of random, I would argue, Q1 kind of all hands on deck type meeting that they live streamed on X last night. If you weren't, there, it happened. It was kind of random, but pretty nice. And he specifically said to hang on to your Tesla stock in that. So I don't know. It's just a lot of weird stuff happening. How much of that contributed to this, we don't know for sure. But nonetheless, a good move regardless. So a lot of good signs are setting up, right? We've been mentioning on Tesla stock how a lot of good signs are finally starting to set up. Obviously, there's still work to be done. And, we're still not out of the woods yet as, from a bullish perspective. But, things are absolutely setting up, potentially nicely here, right? So we had this little bull flag I mentioned, right? We had this nice little impulse move to the upside right here, you can see. So kind of moved like this, right? We had this little bull flag and now we're breaking out. And the breakout target for this bull flag is actually pretty much the low 250s, which is very important because that is a level that Tesla needs to break, right? In my opinion, like Tesla needs to break that. Like Tesla pretty much has to get past 252 roughly, honestly, about 252, 253, something like that. It needs to break past these levels. These levels have proven to be some pretty substantial resistance in the past, right? So this is the level that has to break. And, more importantly, you want to break above that and you want to hold above that. You want the price action not just to kind of, maybe for a split second or two or whatever, kind of go above it and then just get sucked right back under. You want to see it get back above those levels and continue showing strength above those levels, and obviously even better, turning it back into support, something like this, right? That's kind of what I'm personally looking for moving forward as early as next week, right? Early next week, potentially even, right? So again, I don't know when it's going to happen, right? Predicting when these things will happen is, it's pretty much impossible in my opinion. But yeah, that's something that you want to watch out for. Someone actually pointed out something pretty interesting yesterday. I saw on X or Twitter, whatever. Is Tesla usually has a, hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A 9-candle streak. This one I think is also 9 candles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, Tesla tends to do this. I never noticed this, but it tends to do this kind of 9-candle streak of kind of 9 candles of consolidation, and then the 10th candle is a big move. This one right here, 9 candles, earnings, big move. This one, 9 candles. I mean, in this case, it was, of course, Trump in the presidency, but big move, right? And interestingly enough, let's see how many candles there were right here before this big move happened today. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Today's the 10th candle, right? So kind of 9 candles of this sort of sideways consolidation, and the 10th candle with a nice large move. Now, granted, to be fair, we're still technically within this consolidation, but pretty interesting to note that on that 10th candle is when we got a pretty nice almost 5.5% day. So pretty interesting stuff. But going back to the 1 hour chart, right? Going back to the 1 hour chart, putting on the EMAs. So, we're starting to do a bit of like, a change in trend and behavior of the stock on the 1 hour chart at least, right? And what is that trend change? Well, you can see, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, every single time, pretty much throughout this whole sell-off, Tesla has been, except for arguably up here, which was back at the 360s, this whole very aggressive part of the sell-off, Tesla has been below the 50 EMA on the 1 hour chart, right? It only tapped it one time over here where it got rejected pretty substantially, and then we kind of came back up to it again. And yesterday I was saying how we're getting pretty tight, right? Well, today we actually not only went up, retested it and started closing above it, but we're well above the 50 EMA now, right? That's showing strength. It's showing a change in kind of character, if you will, of the stock, at least short term on the 1 hour chart. We have the 8 EMA crossing above the 50 now as well. And unless Monday ends up being an absolute bloodbath, it seems like the 21 is on the verge of getting that crossover as well, which is that next step I kept talking about that I want to see. So again, it's technically not there yet, but again, unless Monday just happens to be a substantial sell-off, which I mean, in this market, you really never know. It's looking pretty imminent for that crossover, right? Which is going to be a better sign for me that bullish momentum is starting to return back into the stock, which is, for me personally, going to be obviously a good signs that I personally look for. It doesn't mean that it's just going to, from here go straight up and 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 only up. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that whatsoever. Right? It's not going to just pretty much do this. Obviously, there'll still be zigzag actions. You'll still get a rejection potentially here, maybe come back down, then go. Like you're still going to get the typical price movement, right? It's not going to be just a straight, dildo up, if you will. You'll still get the typical movement. But the point is the fact that the momentum should be, in theory, of course, shifting in the bull's favor once these EMAs start to cross. And like I said, after the EMAs cross, which we're on the verge of it essentially with the full crossover, the next step, like I mentioned, of course, is breaking above this low 250s, right? 251, 252, 253, something like that. Around that low 250s range. Yeah, that's the next step to break, right? Tesla needs to go ahead and break above that, and that will be quite phenomenal for the stock. Going to the daily chart very quickly. What do we have to look for here? Well, the daily chart has a few things going for it, right? Obviously, we had that bullish divergence on the RSI. That's now starting to play out pretty well, right? The RSI is making higher highs, which is great. Even though the stock isn't making these higher highs just yet, the RSI is, okay. On top of that, we also have the MACD. The MACD had that bullish crossover yesterday, right? This was the first bullish crossover that has happened ever since Tesla was, I think, all the way back up here. This was, I think, like 450s or something like that when it had this initial bearish crossover. Extremely aggressive selling pressure. Again, literally the highest and most extreme selling pressure consecutively Tesla has ever seen, ever in the history of the stock. But now, another thing that's essentially showing that the trend seems to be shifting from the very bearish to, starting to be bullish again potentially, is that crossover we had yesterday. Today, of course, we had a very green day. The MACD, of course, beautiful move up once again, naturally. So that's a good sign, right? That's a good sign. The fact that it's crossing all the way down here is more impactful than if it crosses somewhere in the middle, right? Usually the crossovers in somewhere around the middle, they're not as usually reliable. It could be just false noise, false signals, sideways market, etc. But when you have a crossover all the way up here or a crossover all the way down here, it tends to be, from my experience at least, a little bit more impactful and meaningful. So that's a good sign. That's definitely a good sign that I like to see. And of course, the daily has officially also closed its first daily candle above the 8 EMA, which you can see has been closed, which was at about 242.7. The next stop potentially, assuming we get this 250s breakout, can be that 21 EMA, which is starting to curl. You can see it's not pointing straight down. It's starting to slowly curl. So that could be that next target if we do get this breakout past this low 250s, which again, right now is sitting at around the mid to high 260s. That would be something I'll be personally looking for as a potential target, right? And of course, if we start breaking above that, if we start breaking above these levels up here, 260s, 270s, 280s, that'll be a pretty large range of potential resistance. If that starts getting broken, we start breaking above the 21 EMA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the next step will be closer to the 50 EMA, which will be sitting in the low 300s. And above that will be obviously a retest of this channel right over here, which, depending on when it happens, of course, let's say it happens by the end of the month by some miracle, closer to the 320s. Now, again, that's going to be pretty extreme unless there's quite literally a massive short squeeze, which with Tesla you never know. But, technically speaking, it's a possibility. Just, I wouldn't hold my breath for it, personally speaking. Now, those are all good signs. We're starting to get a lot of changes in the behavior of the stock in terms of the actual trend, which I like. And the final thing I want to talk about is going to be the weekly. Now, the weekly is where, there's good news and bad news, right? The bad news is the fact that we're still technically below this very large weekly rising channel that we did fall below, right? So Tesla wants to break back above this, which is about the mid-ish 250s. So that's going to be the step to do for next week. However, the stock has been extremely oversold, and there's no question about that. And more importantly, if I zoom in very closely here, we have printed, I honestly can't even remember the last time we saw something like this. I mean, the last time we saw something even remotely similar was all the way down here back when, for someone that's been following Tesla for a while, this was when Elon was selling. Remember that? The market was pretty painful. Elon was selling, and the selling pressure on Tesla here was also quite relentless. And then what did it do? It printed 2 hammer candles in a row, right? You can see right here, pretty much marking the bottom, and it had an exceptionally sharp move up over the next, month 2 months, whatever the case may be, right? Whatever this was, about a month and a half, we'll say, right? Very, very aggressive move up over the next month and a half. Now, will this happen again? I mean, time will tell. But the point is the fact that this was the last time I saw Tesla print 2 weekly in a row hammer candles back to back. This is similar, but I have never seen 2 weekly hammer candles on Tesla in a row like this, while also having some of the longest wicks to a hammer candle on a weekly time frame I have seen in quite some time. Again, specifically in a row. That's pretty wild. So that's, I mean, technically speaking, that is supposed to be bullish. Now, whether or not we get that follow through is a different story. But just looking at these 2 candles, if I saw this and I didn't have a position, I'd be very interested. You know, this would very much pique my curiosity from a bullish perspective. Just my opinion, of course, but you know, something to consider. You can also argue this weekly candle was, of course, a inside week candle, because technically speaking, this whole weekly's price range was contained within last week's price range, right? So, you know, you can definitely argue the fact that even just breaking above this week's high would be a pretty good sign for the bulls, which, you know, what is the week's high? We pretty much closed right at it, 249.52, pretty much where we are right now. So even just breaking above that could be a pretty good sign, because this is arguably a inside week candle, right? You can argue the fact that yesterday was an inside day candle. You can see with these 2 candles right here, and we kind of broke above the high of yesterday's, we broke yesterday's high today, and you know, obviously we continued off with a pretty nice follow through. So that's another thing to consider moving forward on Tesla stock. But all in all, you know, there's a lot of good things setting up on Tesla stock and even the market as a whole. Now, whether or not the market has bottomed, you know, that's anyone's guess, obviously, right? I mean, SPY, QQQ, you know, there are some good signs, like SPY, of course, getting that MACD crossover, the first MACD crossover it's had since this bearish crossover back here, pretty much as this correction began. On the daily, of course, QQQ, exact same thing. First bullish crossover on the MACD, also since the initial bearish crossover that happened all the way back here, pretty much as this correction began. So, you know, there are some signs looking up for the market. Now, I wouldn't say the market is completely out of its situation, if you will, but, you know, there are signs starting to emerge that are making me think, okay, you know what, there is a chance that the pain is over. Again, nothing guaranteed, right? In a market like this, nothing is guaranteed for sure. But even looking at the QQQ weekly time frame, you can argue the fact that it is in this very large rising channel, which that, you know, for the last 2 weeks, it arguably held the bottom of the channel. So, you know, I'm seeing all these kind of signs, and I'm starting to think that, you know, it's not that bad, right? I mean, okay, there's potential here. There's potential, right? I mean, I still want to see better follow through, of course. You know, all it takes right now is Trump to do something crazy once again, and the market will probably panic again. But we're starting to see some promise, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, right? So let's see how this actually plays out moving into next week. And again, you have to remember the last 2 weeks of the market has been pretty hectic, right? We had CPI, we had PPI, we had jobless datas, left and right. We had FOMC, we had JPOW, we had VIX expiration on Tuesday, we had OPEX today, we had weak seasonality into like mid-March. There was a lot of negative stuff around the market for the past 2 weeks. And now that's arguably all done. The only thing we have now to arguably, quote unquote, look towards is April 2nd with the tariffs, right? What happens with that? Other than that, you know, you have to take into account the fact that, you know, there's a lot of turbulence that the market went through the last 2 weeks, you know, explains this very aggressive selling pressure, but nonetheless, right? The point is the fact that we seem to be past that now. So let's see how the market decides to digest that moving into next week. I'm very curious to see, but all in all, that's kind of what I'm seeing right now moving forward on Tesla stock. So let me know what you think down below. In terms of options flow, definitely more bullish than bearish. You know, surprisingly pretty mixed in my opinion, but nice 1 million and 1.1 million calls coming in here. 0321, like this was a 1 day to expire. Very interesting. They bought this when it was 245. However, 1.1 million came in for 250 strike for expiring 0417, so next month on the 17th, which is not bad at all. And in terms of confirmed bearish or bullish flow, Tesla confirmed almost 40 million bullish flow. Not crazy, but nonetheless still pretty good. But I'm very curious to see how next week goes, so let's see. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow or on Monday. Peace.